Hey everyone, welcome to today's live stream. I'm Madhrusha. In this session, we are going to deep dive into the exciting topic JSON schema validation and pretty print API. So if you are a developer working with APIs, microservices, or just dealing with the JSON data regularly, this is going to be super useful for you. So trick around. So first, just before we are going to implement the validation in pretty print API, in the previous video we have covered with JSON, not a JSON, but it is a test cases. We need to check whether it is perfectly testing, all the test cases is perfectly working or not. So let's get started. So here we have used the code test dot forward slash test um, uh, minus v. So basically this will return the all the test cases that is a pass here. In the last video, we have covered the test cases for the JSON to struct. So how we can test the all the test cases that is written in the code itself. So we will run this command to check all the test cases whether it is perfectly working or not. So here go test, and inside the test folder we will use the minus v, and then afterwards it will return all the test cases that is written in go test file. So here inside the test folder we have a two test cases we have written. So these test cases perfectly working. Now switch to the JSON schema validation and pretty print API. So for that, first let's talk about the so this is the command that we have used to test all the test cases that is written in the previous video. So now we will switch into we will close the folder, and we will create a JSON validator API folder. So now so So first, let's talk about the what JSON schema validation actually is. So essentially, a JSON schema is the way to define the structure of your JSON data. It is like a contract that says, "Hey, this is the expected format for my data." So we use it to make sure that the data we receive in the API request, it is valid and correct and complete, whether it is a simple user registration form or complex data pipeline. And JSON schema validation, we will ensure that we are processing the clean data. So now let's take a look at the API we are going to build today. So we will be validating the incoming JSON payload against the schema and making sure that required field exists, the data types are correct, and that we handle any nested objects properly. So in addition to validation, we will explore two other cool features. We will, which is called the pretty print, making the JSON more readable for the debugging, and second one is minification, reducing the size of the JSON for the efficient storage and transmission. So all right, let's jump into. All right, so let's jump into the some live coding. I will start by creating the new Go project. Open your terminal and type this command to set up your project directory. So first you can create a folder which is called JSON Validator API, and then afterwards you can create you can open your integrated terminal and hit the command go mode init JSON Validator and API. So this will create a one file which is called the JSON Validator API module. Now we also need a few dependency, the Go JSON schema package for the JSON validation and Gene package for building our API. So now let's install those dependency using the Go package manager. So first one we will go to the Chrome and we will simply copy this command for the Go JSON schema and Gene framework. So first one we will install JSON schema. Then afterwards we will install Gene framework. So first package we have installed it with JSON Validator API. Not a JSON validator, it is a Go JSON schema. And then afterwards we have installed the Gene framework in our project. So now next up, let's define our JSON schema. This schema will specify the structure of our incoming JSON data, and I have prepared the sample schema where we are expecting the name, age, and address. So we will create one JSON file which is for schema JSON. Schema.json and insert this kind of a JSON. Then we will create one file which is called main.go, and now we will start writing the code. So now let's implement the API. We will be using the gene to build a simple server that accepts the post request with the JSON data and validate it against the schema and returns either the success or error message. The package name import encoding JSON. We are not importing any package. Just before implementation, we are not doing. So load schema at data variable JSON schema go JSON schema. So this will import this package. So basically it is a library for validating the JSON against the schema. Then afterwards, we will start writing the code in init function first. Function init, and inside the init function we will use schema data error IO. Schema.json file. If error then we will simply use log fail to read schema and simply print the message then afterwards we will simply use schema loader here we will use new string loader then afterwards we will simply use JSON schema and error and we will so first one we have read the schema from the content of the schema.json from the local file and then afterwards we will convert the schema string into the go JSON schema loader. Then we will check whether there is some error or not. Okay, it's fine now. Schema.json file is already there, multiple. Okay, now we will start implementing the validate JSON payload. So here we will actually use gene reference and simply we will import github.com gene unique gene, and C is capital here. Then afterwards we will simply use. So here we will use the API handler function to validate the JSON to process incoming JSON payload. And then afterwards we will declare the variable JSON data to store the JSON body as a key value structure. Mapping interface. Then afterwards we will check is there any something error when we are binding the incoming request JSON to JSON data map. So should bind JSON, and inside the JSON we will pass the JSON data .json http.status pad request http.status pad request. Then afterwards gene.h, and simply we will pass error, and here we will pass invalid JSON. Then afterwards we are not passing anything. Then afterwards we will use document loader. We will validate against the schema. So validate against schema document loader go JSON schema new go loader, and simply JSON data we are passing. Then afterwards result error JSON schema validate the document loader. Then afterwards document loader. See JSON then afterwards we will see, we will actually returning the same thing here, but we will simply passing the HTTP internal server error and schema invalid, or we can say that validation failed. validation error, sorry, not continuous error. Then afterwards here we also need to return, and here also we need to return. Then afterwards if result if result dot valid is not equal to valid, then error string skip is HTTP status pad request, and here we will pass errors errors and simply we will return. Then afterwards then we will, if everything is okay, then we will simply query our format. We will take 5 minutes break. So continue with our format. So see query, then afterwards format if query double equals to pretty, then we will pretty JSON we will simply pretty our JSON by indenting the format, and we will simply returning our string c dot string tp dot status. Okay, string pretty JSON, and we need to also import encoding JSON here, and encoding JSON is already there. So I think okay, now JSON thing is gone. Okay, now if it is pretty, then and if format is a Minify, then it will use the Marshal only. Marshal, and we will here. We do not need to pass this, and basically here Minify JSON data, Minify JSON data, else if and else c.json http dot status. Okay, and view dot h JSON is valid. Now coming back to the main function, we will use the router to set up our gene framework. Router dot validator JSON, and we will simply print our message. Server is running port 8080, and we will router our run in router run in 8080. So our server will be start on port number 8080. Now we will check whether it is perfectly working or not. Go run main dot code. Okay, 18 number line. I think here we will need to IO util created schema loader, new string loader. So I think maybe schema data error and I think now we will check whether it is perfectly working or not working. I think we will use string here. Now I think perfectly working. So our port is running successfully on 8080 port. Now we will test our API. So first I will open the Postman. Then afterwards we will create one collection. Validate API. And we will make the new HTTP request here, making the post request. Then afterwards we will use the 8080 validate. Then afterwards row, and then afterwards we will simply copy paste from this JSON to the Postman and check whether it is perfectly working or not. So here it is saying that JSON is valid. So we should get the valid JSON response if everything is correct. But for example, if I'm passing the only name and age, then what should be the response? What should we get the response? We will check. So here it is saying that address is required because we are validating our fields. So basically go to VS Code and check. So we will validate all the properties like a name, age, and address, and we will basically loading our data from the properties. So here in validate JSON, Basically here it is validate all the fields that is required, name, age and address. So that is the reason it is a address is required. If I'm passing the address, for example, if I'm passing address perfectly, I'm passing address only with the city, then what should be the response? Yeah, it is perfectly working because we are not provided the zip code. So here in the address property, we are also required the two properties, which is called the city and then afterwards zip code. So city and zip code it is required. That is the reason it is a saying that zip code is required. Now if I'm passing the zip code perfectly in the JSON, then what should be the response? Yeah, now you can see JSON is valid. Now if we are passing the format pretty in the URL itself, then what should be the response? Okay, post responses it is there. What about the Minify? Minify. Okay, here we have made the mistake. Minify. Now once again we will check. Run, restart the app. So basically here we have made the mistake. Here we have used the pretty along with the Minify. So that is the reason now error is gone. I have corrected this code. So this is how our code looks like. And now go to the Postman. Here you can pass format along with the Minify. Then what should be the response? So here you can see it is a giving the Minify version of the JSON. But what about the if I'm passing the pretty, then what should be the response? Let's see. Okay, still it is not perfect. I think we have made the mistake once again, spelling mistake we have done. So go to the VS Code and correct this one. Restart our app. Go to Postman. And once again, you can pass the format with pretty and post request. And this is the JSON that is not a beautify. So we will send the response. And now you can see we will actually response that is coming with a beautifier mode. So if I am here, click on that, then it will beautify this JSON. So same thing, we will beautify our JSON here by providing the parameter, query parameter. So this is how we have completed the pretty. Then afterwards, Minify Minify. Minify, it is coming with the single line. Pretty comes with the beautifier, our JSON format, and normal API. It is validate that JSON is valid or not. So we have implemented the JSON validation. Then afterwards, validate Minify, beautifier, and one more also. We will also check whether it is a JSON is valid against the schema or not. So 4 kind of a functionality we have implemented. Now coming back to the use cases. So what are the use cases? So go to the switch to the Chrome tab and see what are the kind of use cases we have developed this kind of application. So whenever we are API request made using the microservices or web apps, it will ensure that all the required field it is coming to the front end API request and follow the correct format. Then afterwards it will also prevent the malformed data from breaking the backend services. So for example, if somebody actually using the registration API, and it will verify that name, email and address that is a properly structured or not, using this kind of a code can be helpful when we are validating our fields. Then afterwards, payment API. So payment API ensure that card numbers and expiry dates have a valid format before the processing. So this kind of things we will also implement, and we will also ensure that card number, expiry date, this kind of a validation we can also implement on the backend side and check that whether it is perfectly working or not, whether it is invalid or valid. Then afterwards it is also useful in the configuration validation. So it will ensure that the JSON based configurations like a Kubernetes, Terraform and CI/CD pipeline that is error free and prevents the deployments failure that is caused by misconfiguration. So for example, Kubernetes deployment check for required fields like replicas, image and ports, and Terraform pipelines validate the JSON before running the Terraform apply. Then afterwards it will also useful in the log and processing and data pipeline. So it will validate and filter the logs before the ingestion into the database and analytic platforms, and ensure that structure event data for the real-time processing. So it will also helpful in the monitoring systems where we can actually implement a log structure in our app just before we are storage implementation we have done. Then afterwards we will also implement the real-time streaming using the Kafka to event streams filter before sending the downstream. Then afterwards it will also we have a cover this scenario pretty print and minification. So it will help to debugging. Our developer can request the JSON in the readable format, or also data compression is very easy when we are implementing the minified format for efficiency. Then afterwards it is also helpful in the data quality assurance and ETL workflow. Basically it will ensure that the JSON data meets required the standard before the insertion into the data warehouse. It will help to maintain the structured data in the BigQuery, Snowflake and Redshift. So for example, it will survey the response validation, ensure that a field exists before the analytic processing. And second one is e-commerce product data validation, filter out incomplete or incorrect data. So this is how we have developed this application. So what are the benefit of this API? We will ensure the data integrity and prevents error helpful. Then afterwards helps in the debugging and formatting the JSON response, prevents the malformed JSON from the breaking the backend services. It will also support the multiple use cases like API validation, DevOps side. It will helpful logging logging in the logging framework we have implemented just before inserting the data. Then afterwards ETL also useful, microservices, web apps. So lot of use cases in this app. So it is a very helpful when we are implementing the APIs with the JSON. So that's how we have completed this tutorial. So thanks for joining the live session today. I hope you found this useful for your work with the JSON validation, formatting, and API design. So if you have more questions, feel free to reach out and make sure hit that like button if you learn something new. Until the next time, happy coding.